What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into another edition of the Fan Committee Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Tooman, as always, joined by my co-host, Michael Herrera. We are 5 weeks deep into this NFL season. We've been away for a little bit, but now we're kind of circling back in. A little over a month of the season, we can kind of get a broader picture of where the NFL season's going this year. We got a better feel for some of these teams. And Mike, your team, the Miami Dolphins, has been one of the most exciting stories of the season so far this year. They took down the Giants yesterday. Obviously, they had that big 70-point game against Denver. Did lose to Buffalo last week, though, which kind of puts a little bit of a damper on their hot start a little bit. But the AFC East, we talked about it before the season. We thought maybe could be the best division in the league. The Dolphins are in a prime position at 4-1. What's your thoughts on your squad so far? We can start with the AFC East picture right here.
Well, I think it's important to note that we're not leading in the division because Buffalo lost yesterday to the Jaguars, which I thought was pretty interesting. We thought the Jaguars were going to be a team that maybe took that next leap because they brought in guys like Ridley. We were a little uncertain on if they had what it takes to win a Super Bowl, but we did expect improvement from them. But when season one or week one rolled around and they barely beat the Colts, I was a little confused about what was going on with the Jaguars. And the Jaguars, they've been a little up and down, but they've been fine. But for the Bills, which are such a juggernaut team typically, to lose to the Jaguars was kind of interesting. And it does reflect a little badly on the Dolphins that we weren't able to beat the Bills. But I think the Dolphins just came into that game a little too confident and we got humbled, and I think that's okay. But we're still in the lead right now, and I think 4-1 is an incredible place to be. And I'm hoping we end up being 5-1 when we head into Philly, because I think Philly's going to be by far our hardest game so far.
That next week, Eagles,
Yeah.
Dolphins? Wow, that's going to
No,
be
Eagles Dolphins is 2 weeks from now. Next week is Panthers.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and I think the Eagles will be our hardest test. Being 5-1 when we face the Eagles is really important, especially since they're one of the two undefeated teams so far.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that we get back into a groove and, maybe we play Super Bowl, because the Eagles have been kind of up and down as well this season, even though they're still undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, we can get into them a bit more in a sec. They beat the Rams yesterday. I think with your team, I mean, the offense obviously has been incredible because we talked about before the year, the run game was still something they needed to iron down. But Devon Achane as a rookie, I mean, he's not even getting that many carries yet. He's just super fast. He's getting 8, 9 yards per carry so far with all these huge explosive performances. And Mostert's also been really good. He's stayed healthy. And then obviously Waddle and Hill continue to be excellent. But I think the thing about the Bills game is the Bills were riding a lot of momentum. They had just killed the Raiders and the Commanders. But now all of a sudden, even though you did lose that game and it was a big, the Bills blew you out, now the Bills are dealing with a lot of injuries again. Tre'Davious White's out for the season. Matt Milano's out for the season. That's their two best defensive players, especially when you consider Von Miller's been out and he's getting older. So I would say those are the two most important parts of that Bills defense. So already they're dealing with some issues. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, I know you're missing Ramsey, but he's yet to play for the team. So otherwise, they're pretty healthy. They got a lot of momentum. I think Mike McDaniel's continuing to set himself apart as one of the better offensive coaches in the NFL. And it comes down to the fact that Tua's healthy and performing well. And the Dolphins weren't too far off from this at the start of last year. We've talked about this before, but it was Tua's concussions and his other injuries that really derailed the season. So I'm not too surprised. I predicted the Bills to be better than Miami, but I'm not too surprised now that I've seen it that you guys are in first. And I think it comes down to, I think if the Bills continue to struggle with injuries and, Diggs and Allen are awesome, obviously, but right now it looks like the Dolphins have the more balanced, the better overall roster.
Yeah, and I think especially because it remains to be said that the Dolphins seem to be very comfortable with what it is that they're trying to do. And I feel like a lot of times when teams, they bring in new schemes and stuff like that, it could take even up to a whole season to kind of iron out, how do we want to run our offense? How do we want to do this? But the Dolphins, aside from, well, not even week one, because we still came out firing week one. It was more our defense that kind of still needs to figure things out. But our offense has clicked immediately with what McDaniel has been trying to do. And I think it's only improved from last year, because I do think they changed a few things. I think they've been trying to add more of the run game in. And I think that's super important because that helps take pressure off of Tua. The Bills are still a team to be concerned about. I do know that they're, kind of in this weird up and down state right now, with the injuries, like you're saying. They did come off a bad loss. I think losing to the Jaguars is not good for them.
I think a big part of that, it comes down, you have to assume Jacksonville's got to stay in London, play a second straight
Yeah.
game over there. Buffalo obviously didn't have the same amount of time to adjust to, the time zones, the travel, all that. But I don't know. It's weird because you mentioned Jacksonville. We thought they were going to be a lot better. They've been very up and down, but yesterday, Etienne, Ridley both looked really good. Kirk looked good. So everybody actually clicked. Where
Mhm.
there's other weeks where I felt Trevor Lawrence, I don't know if it was his fault, the coaching, whatever, but he kind of zeroed in on like one receiver, kept trying to force the Ridley or Kirk, and it kind of made their offense lose a little momentum. But they looked more balanced yesterday, and maybe that's just they had that edge on the Bills from being over in London. But I don't know. London games are weird, so I don't want to think too much of it for the Bills. But with the issues they're having, Milano got hurt yesterday. Like we said, I like you were saying, I think the Dolphins, they definitely have the momentum on their side for the AFC East right now. There's a lot of ball left to be played, but I don't know. Miami, I wouldn't even be against them being as if you pick them to say if you're like my team's going to the Super Bowl this year, it's hard to argue that right now.
I think, I mean, that is fair. I don't know. I mean, aside from like the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs are the only other really consistent team outside of the Bills. I think our division is pretty weak. Like, I think we very clearly should be one of the top two teams, like between the Jets and the Patriots. They also haven't been playing great.
I definitely agree, but Bills and Dolphins have definitely set themselves apart in that division, and I think Miami's even going to start continuing to set themselves apart from Buffalo. But you mentioned the Bengals and their slow start. They did not destroy, but Jamar Chase destroyed the Cardinals defense in that Bengals 34-20 win. He got me 60 fantasy points. Very grateful for that. But yeah, I think the injury to Burrow was a big deal. And they've also had some like O-line injuries. T. Higgins has been out. So I don't know. Their offense has been a little out off kilter, but they definitely looked a lot better yesterday. And that's Arizona. Arizona's obviously surpassed everyone's expectations. I picked them to go 0-17. That was obviously wrong of me, but I still don't think their defense is that good. They've been in a lot of like high scoring or really competitive games. So I don't think the Bengals doing great against them yesterday. It's definitely a good sign. It's a step in the right direction. But for a team I picked to make the Super Bowl, I'm still not sold. They're gonna have to do this a few more times before I'm like, the Bengals are back. They're gonna be where they're supposed to be. So when you look at that, you mentioned the AFC North, which was a division I was really high on. I picked Lamar Jackson to be MVP. I thought Todd Monken coming in as offensive coordinator was going to give them a lot more balance. Now they did lose Dobbins again, but I don't know. Zay Flowers has looked good, but the offense as a whole, I can't really say has been as dynamic as I was hoping for. And it's the fact that the defense has gotten better is really what's allowing them to still be one of the better teams in the AFC right now.
No, I agree. I think the Ravens, I don't know. I mean, it's always like weird with them because the Ravens always manage to stay in it, but it
Yeah.
just never seems to go their way. Either it's the injuries or like a few bad games, and I don't know, it's pretty interesting. I do think that they should win the division. I don't think the Steelers are a better team than them. I think the Bengals could, if they figure things out, could win the division still. I mean, they're only 2-3. They could come back strong. But I
Right.
think for now, the Ravens are definitely the best team in this division right now. I don't think the Browns, anyone has to worry about them, unfortunately. But the Steelers, what do you think about the Steelers? Because I think they've been a very weird team to watch.
Well, they are. I mean, Matt Canada continues to be a horrid offensive coordinator, but like we talked about them, right? And because we actually had time to get a whole preview out for them, and I was really high on them. I thought even with Matt Canada still as offensive coordinator, I thought they made improvements on the O line. I thought the defense was going to be really, really good. Like the Patrick Peterson, Joey Porter Jr. combo, I thought was going to really give them an extra edge in the secondary. And honestly, it really hasn't. Joey Porter Jr. did make a big play in yesterday's game, but overall, he hasn't really changed the game. Patrick Peterson's been a disappointment. I mean, that Pickens play yesterday to win the game, that was electric. I mean, it was awesome, and it shows the playmaking potential he has if he ever gets a good, coaching quarterback combo. I don't know how much to pin on Kenny Pickett. I obviously don't think he's ever going to be like a Pro Bowl, all pro quarterback, but I think he can be better. It's just, I don't know. Like, besides Pickens, they don't really have any weapons. I don't know. Maybe Tomlin will still get them to 9-8, but right now, I wouldn't be too confident in them at all.
I think the thing with the Steelers was that we saw the potential in their offense because their personnel, I think, had improved from last season to this season, especially since it was Pickens is going to be year two, Pickett year two. You think they should be taking a leap. And Pickens, I think, has started to kind of take that leap. Pickett, a little slower. I think the biggest issue was Matt Canada.
Hmm.
Like, apparently it turns out that like on the Pickens throw, he audibled into that. It was not the original play call. And I
Yeah.
understand that like audibles are still part of the offensive scheme. It's predetermined in a way, but like the touchdown wasn't Matt Canada. This was a Pickens, and props to them because I think that was a great play by them. But I think it really goes to show you how much of like a shackle uh Canada has been to this team because offensively they should at least be better,
Mhm.
especially since their defense has been kind of like middle of the road at best so far. But you're probably right. They probably will still scrape by to 9-8 because they're currently 3-2. They're leading the division.
They scraped by yesterday. They beat Cleveland one week. The thing about Cleveland is everyone got really excited about them, but we talked about our concerns about them. I mean, I guess I was wrong a little bit about the defense. It definitely seems better than I thought, but I also don't think they're going to keep up on that historic pace they were on the first three games. We saw last week once Watson went down. I mean, I think Watson will play again, but he was already inconsistent as is. And then the second they went to the backup quarterback, didn't matter that the defense was good anymore. They lost 27-3, I believe. And without Chubb, I mean, that's the superstar of the offense. I mean, Cooper's still a good receiver, but other than that, I don't know. I think that Browns team gets to like 7 or 8 wins, but I think the North will be very like closely packed standing
Hmm.
wise, but I don't see Cleveland winning the division. Like you said, I think the Ravens are in the driver's seat. Bengals, if they have a hot streak second half of the year, get back on track, they'll be right in there. But now Steelers and Browns, I know they had some early season hype, but I don't think either of them are gonna stick it out.
No, absolutely. And coming off of them, so it's kind of like, do you think the Ravens, the Steelers, like who do you think is going to be winning this division at the end of the day?
Probably the Ravens
Yeah.
because at least they still. I don't think they've made the improvements I wanted them to, but Lamar Jackson at least is comfortable playing his game on offense, and he's gotten them some big wins. They should have beat the Colts. I mean, Tucker missed 2 field goals in that game. That was kind of a total, aberration. So I
Hmm.
think they're going to finish with 10 or 11 wins. I think they still get first place. And, Bengals probably rally and get a wild card spot, but that's what I would say right now. Maybe the Ravens can continue to get better on offense as the season goes along, but even now, I think with their little grit and grind style, I think they'll find a way to get in there.
I think it's the safest bet, which is how things are looking, because I don't think the Steelers have proven that
Mhm.
they can like really go the distance. Like, the Bengals, this week, even though they did play the Cardinals, which is an important little caveat, they still played pretty well comparatively to how they've been playing. Probably their best game all season, I'd say. I think this is a good game to help them get back into groove. And it's an important win for them. So totally, I would agree with those standings. But what about the AFC South? Do you
Yeah.
think the Jaguars are going to hold on to this divisional lead?
Are they in the lead right now? I guess
Yeah,
they
they're three
the
and
win
two.
yesterday because they
Colts
beat
in
the
second, also
Colts.
3-2.
They beat the Colts week one. Yeah, this is another division where it's going to be very compact. So Richardson got hurt yesterday against in the Titans game, but this whole division is so weird. Like the Titans have had some blowout wins, and then the other games they've had horrible offensive showings. Like Ryan
Hmm.
Tannehill and Derrick Henry have looked beyond washed, but then they'll have a big win. Like they beat the Bengals 27-3. So they're obviously well coached by Rabel. So they're going to be in the race. D Hop kind of had a breakout yesterday, his best game with the Titans, but they still lost. The
Hmm.
Colts, they just gave Jonathan Taylor a new contract, which I support, but the whole like it makes no sense how they handled the situation. They were like, okay, we don't think we need you. We're not going to pay you. And then we're going to put you on the pup list because we don't want you to play because we want to trade you. Zach Moss played well, including
Hmm.
yesterday when Jonathan Taylor was back. He had an awesome game, but then they still paid him. So, I mean, I get it. I think Jonathan Taylor's great. And I think for this season, it's good they have two backs like that. But I don't know why they either didn't just pay him a month ago or trade him. Like, I don't know. It feels like it just worked out really weird, but the Colts have really surprised. Anthony Richardson has been a lot better than people thought right from the jump. He's not the raw prospect everyone said he was. So I've liked the Colts. And then you mentioned Houston earlier. They've been like they lost yesterday Atlanta. They weren't quite as explosive on offense, but at the same time, Stroud has been, I think he's the clear favorite for rookie of the year so far. I don't think many people would disagree. And the receivers, I mean, Nico Collins, I don't know where this came from, but he went from like, yeah, maybe he'll be a starter for them, maybe he'll become something to like an actual difference maker. Tank Dell's been good. So to me, I don't think Houston can win this division if their offensive line doesn't get healthy, though, because right now they have no run game. Four of their starters have been injured, including Tunsil, who's like one of the best left tackles in the league. Defensively, I think the D'Amico Ryan's hire has looked great, but to me, I actually think it's going to be the Colts or the Jags who wind up winning the division. I think Houston is, like you said, though, has laid a great blueprint for the future, but I think this season, I don't know, I think they're going to be like up and down, like 7 or 8 wins. I think they're going to be in that range, but I have like what I've seen. But to me, it comes down to Richardson's health. If he's like going to be out a while, I'd probably still stick with the Jags because even though they've been up and down, they might have turned a corner in London yesterday. And also, I think they've had the talent to I still think they have the talent to win the division. That's why I had them as the 1 seed in the AFC before the season. So I'm gonna go Jags, but I think you can argue for all four of these teams. If you're a fan of one of these four teams, you have to be feeling somewhat confident right now.
No, that's totally fair. Even though I do agree with the sentiment that the Jaguars have not been as great as I thought they would be out of the gate, they still have been the most consistent team so far. I think the Texans are going to be a problem in the future. Maybe not this year because, like you're saying, offensive line. I think the Colts, it's possible that like the Jonathan Taylor trade or not trade, new contract got what happened probably because maybe like Richardson's already been injured, so maybe they thought it was best that in case Richardson goes down with another injury, or like maybe it's best to just load up on the offensive firepower they had.
Mhm.
And although it does suck that like it wasn't worked out sooner, or maybe they like made a trade to like send him somewhere he was wanted and somewhere that they get something good back, that's like whatever now. Like it's already happened. And so hopefully this is a good thing for them. And it seems to me like they're gonna try to incorporate him back into the offense slowly. Because Zach Moss, as we were talking about, still really good, played
Yeah.
incredibly yesterday. I mean, he popped out for 40 fantasy points. Like that's crazy. No
Yeah.
one would have expected that when he was on the Bills.
No,
I
not at
don't
all.
I don't I do agree, I do understand why you're saying that all four of these teams you can make an argument for them. I don't think the Titans as much. I just don't think they have the quarterback to get it done. I think these other teams have all like three solidified good quarterbacks.
Hmm.
And I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that Richardson has not been as raw as a prospect as we thought would be, which I'm incredibly happy about because I'm a big Richardson fan. And it's incredibly interesting that like he's just kind of come out the gate and played really good so far. And I think that's also just good news for the Colts' future. So the
Yeah.
AFC South was not as bad of as a division as everyone thought it was going to be coming into the season, which I appreciate. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, the critics of the AFC South will still say like none of these teams are going to win the Super Bowl. But I think this division's really interesting. I
Mhm.
enjoy watching all their games every week. For the most part, I mean, Falcons Texans was sneakily one of the better games today. Atlanta wound up winning because well, we could talk about it. Desmond Ritter went from one of the worst quarterbacks to actually had a really good game yesterday. But yeah, I don't know. I think it comes down to if Richardson's healthy, if the Colts can establish this like dominant run game, Taylor, Richardson, and Moss, then they could like beat a lot of teams in the regular season. I don't know if their O line is as good as it was a couple of years ago, but if the O line they have now was the one from a few seasons ago, this Colts team would be pretty dominant on the ground. So we'll have to see how it shakes out, but I think I'll ride with the Jags for now, though, like I said. But I think the Colts are my dark horse. If Richardson continues to stay on fire, if Taylor reintegrates really well, they could maybe come back and win the division.
I think a big issue right now is going to be how long is Richardson going to be out?
Mhm.
And depending on how long he's going to be out, are they going to win all those games? Are they going to lose all of them? Because if Richardson's out like 3 or 4 weeks and they lose all those games, that's going to be a tough spot for them to come out of. But
Well,
Minshew's
he's
a
the
very capable backup.
yeah.
So I don't think even if Richardson is out for a prolonged period of time, I think they'll be able to stay afloat long enough for him to come back, possibly, sneak a wild card, something like that. So I do understand your sentiment where you're coming from. So what do you think about the AFC West? It's pretty clear cut to me. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is like Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes just running circles around the competition. Like in a year where the Chiefs, I think, are worse than they've been in a while, just with like a lack of any reliable wide receiver. I know a lot of them are young guys, but no one has been consistent. Their defense has stepped up. I think it's been a little bit better in the secondary than last year. I think they're clearly going to win this division, and I think two of these coaches aren't going to last. Staley and McDaniels could both be fired by Thanksgiving at this rate, and Denver. I have no clue. I was like, well, if the Chargers are bad, then Denver will be good. Like that was my argument. Denver, their run defense is horrible. One of the worst run defenses I've ever seen so far this season. It's not just the Dolphins game. Like Brees Hall popped off for 177 yards yesterday. So I don't know. Like, and Russell Wilson, he's like their best player right now. He is the least of their problems. He's keeping them in games to some degree. Yesterday he had to scramble out of the pocket over and over. He didn't get sacked a lot, but the Jets had the pressure on. And I don't know, Javonte Williams is disappointed. Jerry Judy's once again not taking that step. And then defensively, like Surtain is still good, but even he had some troubles in the games against Miami, things like that. I don't know. A lot of people are like already joking about how they should fire Sean Payton. I don't know about that, but there's clearly a ton of issues for this Denver team. So I don't know. The Packers play the Raiders tonight. I'm a little nervous because the Raiders weirdly have been like okay. They've had some bad losses, but they still have some star power. Chargers, same thing, but I don't know. I just don't believe in the Chargers one bit. I think they have maybe the worst coach in the league leading them. So if the Chargers ever get a real coach, they'll maybe be contenders, but it's the Chiefs, and I think the Chiefs will be the only team in this division that makes the playoffs.
No, I agree. Even if you want to say the Chiefs might be 3-2 because of the controversial Jets,
Yeah.
because of some questionable calls, even if I think they'd still be by and far away the better team anyways out of the four of these. The Broncos, I don't think they're gonna fire Peyton, because considering how much they gave up to get him, bring him
First
in,
round.
and
Yeah.
the pedigree he has, because he still is a Super Bowl winning coach. He has that pedigree. But we should have seen better out of this team so far. I think Peyton has done a terrible job. I think he's done nothing but shoot himself in the foot with all the comments he makes about other teams, other players, other coaches. And you're right, Russell Wilson has played incredibly, all things considered. He's improved a lot from last year. And I think the biggest thing, like you're saying, is the defense. I think even great players like Pat Surtain, they've struggled. And it seems that the reports coming out that the Broncos are willing to do just like a fire sale on the defense. They're willing
Yeah.
to get rid of basically anyone and just hope to rebuild because it kind of seems like they're going to be very heavily in contention for Caleb Williams right now. So
Yeah.
it kind of remains to be seen what happens with that. Maybe they'll trade some good defensive players to the Dolphins. I wouldn't be opposed. I'll take
Hey man, get Justin Simmons in Green Bay.
I'll
I'll
take
take
I'll take DJ Jones on the D line. I don't
There you
care.
go. Okay.
But no, I think the Raiders they've been okay. Uh I think Josh McDaniels needs to go. I think that's the biggest issue. They need to because I would agree with you that like the rest of the team isn't terrible. They've played better than expected. I know they're still 1-3, but I thought they'd honestly be like even worse than that. Like not their record, but I just thought like they haven't played as badly as I expected them to, but I think their biggest issue is that Josh McDaniel sucks as a coach, and they don't really have a solidified quarterback. Maybe Aiden O'Connell, maybe he'll be able to be a bridge quarterback if he's
Yeah.
decent. But for now, they need to figure out their quarterback situation, especially.
I think Jimmy G has been fine, but Jimmy G is injury prone. Like I feel like people don't talk about that. He's already had two injuries this season, and his status tonight. I think he's playing, but
Hmm.
it wasn't confirmed all year or all week. Like he was questionable all week. He missed last week, so I don't know. And Devontae Adams is questionable tonight too. The run game they have really haven't gotten going, and I don't think it's Jacob's fault completely, but at the same time, it is the same O line from last year, more or less. So. I don't know, like just a lot of what made them work last year. I mean, Hunter Renfro, I was hoping, shake off the concussions right back to being a great slot receiver like he was 2 seasons ago. It seems like he's just I don't won't even say past his prime because he just had that 1 year, but he just seems like a non-factor. Myers has been really good. And then you got like this is far from Josh McDaniel's biggest problem, but even like Austin Hooper playing over Michael Mayer, who was supposed to be like an awesome rookie tight end, and he's barely touching the football. Like, I don't know. Their defense has been better than expected. So there's just I think it does come down to coaching. It's just these late game scenarios. I mean, they lost to the Chargers in a late game scenario. So I don't know. I'm confident about my Packers tonight against them. I'll say that. And the Packers have always done well against the Raiders. I might eat my words because Green Bay's been up and down, but I don't think the Raiders are gonna, I don't think they're gonna compete for a wild card. But I do think they could be better than Denver for sure.
No, I think they definitely will be. I just think that they have like they've shown a bit more cohesiveness overall with the team in a general sense.
Hmm.
And as for the Chargers, I it might just be because like I don't dislike the Chargers like necessarily, but I do hate that the Chargers are always compared to the Dolphins. And even then, like I just don't think like the Chargers just haven't showed they have it, which is like, and I know it is like such like a weird like term to use, but I don't know if it's mentality. I don't know if it's like a certain amount of like humbleness, but there's just like you need to have something that like really puts you over the edge. You can't just have good players because there's so many amazing players who never won Super Bowls, like Barry Sanders, Dan Marino, like these are legends, some of the best at their position never won. Like it's the whole team, and I just don't think the Chargers like it's always the injuries. It's always Brandon Staley. There's always something
Yeah.
holding them back. And
Hmm.
it sucks because I like a lot of their players. I think Justin Herbert's one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. I know people always compare him to Tua, but I still think he's incredible. And I don't know. I mean, Austin Eckler's been injured too. That kind of sucks. And Joshua Kelly, who's the backup, hasn't played well outside of week one. Isaiah Spiller was a high draft pick 2 years ago. Hasn't done too much either. Like
Don't
it's
play. Yeah.
been very odd with the Chargers. It's always someone's playing badly, someone's getting injured. Brandon Staley's getting in the way of this team. It's I don't know. I don't really know what to say about the Chargers because I think they're at best the second best team in this division, but not like it's not like they're gonna be like wild card contention at this point. I
No.
don't think.
Yeah, I think the South and the East just have a lot of good teams. Like I would pick the Jets over the Chargers right now. I just think the Jets have at least shown defensively and with the run game that they have the potential to put together real cohesive games, even if it's not, Aaron Rodgers' explosive offense. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just I hate saying, oh, they're cursed, but like it's the same story every year for a decade, maybe more. I mean, at least when I've watched football, it's gone back longer than that. So they made the playoffs last year. They got embarrassed by Jacksonville in the comeback. So I don't know. I think Staley should be fired after they blew that lead, and he's
Mhm.
still costing them games. So that's really what I have to say about that. But I guess to wrap up on the AFC before we kind of look at the NFC, like who do you think the real Super Bowl contenders are right now? To me, it's Miami, Buffalo, and then the Chiefs. You have to at least give them the benefit of the doubt. I think there's really only three.
Yeah, I would also throw, I guess, the Jags in there just because I think like all right, you don't have to have four contenders. I'd say the Bills, Dolphins, and Chiefs. I think the Chiefs, even though like there's the controversial record already, and then also the receivers has been like very much like an issue for them. It's still the Chiefs. It's still Mahomes. It's still Andy Reid, by far just the best, just like quarterback coach duo in the league. Probably since like the best since Belichick and Brady. Let's be honest.
Hmm.
So I think definitely it's those three teams squarely in the front. I would say probably the Chiefs first, Bills second, Dolphins third. I know that might be underselling the Dolphins, but after being blown out by Buffalo, I want the Dolphins to show that they can beat Buffalo, they can beat teams of that caliber. And
Yeah.
that's why I think the Philly game is super important. They could make the Super Bowl if they continue to click, figure things out with the defense, maybe make an important trade or two, something to get the ball rolling with this team.